If you're watching this video, you're most likely familiar with what a sequencer is. The classic MOOG 960 sequential controller had 8 steps. It also had 3 rows, each with a separate voltage output. The most common use case for a sequencer is to use the voltage output as a keyboard control voltage, a CV. This CV controls the pitch of one or more oscillators. The clock output may be used as a gate. In this configuration on a 960 sequencer, you would have a series of 8 notes that played in sequence repeatedly. A less common use for the sequencer is as a Waveshaper, often with 8, 10, or 16 steps per cycle. In this use case, with 8 steps, a single cycle waveform is created by the 8 steps of the sequencer output. When the clock is running at 800 Hz, the voltage output is an audio signal at 100 Hz. 800 Hz divided by 8 steps equal 100 Hz. The sequencer as Waveshaper is the use case we're going to explore in this video. We'll look at several different sequencers. One of the questions we will answer is how fast can this sequencer run? This will provide an upper limit to the frequency range of the audio output from the sequencer. In many cases, the limit will be just a few hundred hertz. Let's get into it. So here's a real-world example of what we're talking about. This is the double Deka ultrasonic voltage-controlled oscillator. It has 2 banks of 10 faders, and it has an oscillator that's running at 10 times the speed of a normal oscillator. So as it goes through all 10 steps, it will take 1/10 of that time, so it'll have this waveform at the frequency of a normal oscillator. You can see here that this is a flat line, and as we raise this, we have a 10% pulse. 20%, 30%, 40%, 50%, a square wave, and you can hear it and you can see it. So let's do a few more kind of standard wave shapes. The first thing we're going to do is the sawtooth. And you can see it's not a perfect sawtooth. First of all, it's stepped, and second, it's not exactly linear. It's not a straight line, but we get something of the sawtooth sound. It's a bit buzzy. Now let's create a triangle. Not a precise triangle, but a triangle nonetheless, and you see, of course, that it is also stepped. We've now divided it into 2 halves, and we've got a sound that's an octave higher. We can get a little bit closer to a square wave, although it's imperfect. And now we have a square wave that is up 2 octaves and a third. Let's go back to our square wave. One of the things that I want to point out is that you can adjust the harmonic content often with a single fader. And you can dial in specific harmonics. And that's a demo of some standard wave shapes and how to create them with a sequencer as a Waveshaper. This is the Q960 Sequencer from synthesizers.com. It's modeled on the MOOG 960. I've got it clocked externally from a VCO, and we're listening to the 3rd row here, which is set up max, min, max, min, max, min, max, min, and let's plug in the clock and listen to the range. And I'll switch octaves on the driving oscillator. And that's quite high, but still in the audio range. I'm raising the fine tune, and as I continue to raise it, the pitch actually goes down until it stops altogether. At this point, we've overclocked it, and it's not functioning as a sequencer anymore. So that's the Q960 Sequencer from synthesizers.com. It's got a dramatically wide range. It does have its limits, but they're quite high, well within a functional audio range. This is the KLEE Sequencer. It's a 16-step sequencer in Eurorack format. It can be configured as 16 by 1 or 8 by 2. This is the A output. This is the B output. We're listening to the A output, and we're clocking this at audio rates by the 921 oscillator. We have this switch set so that it resets at step 3, and we have only 2 active steps. Let's take the clock and connect it. Next, let's test the range. At the 1 foot stop, the clock is going too fast for the KLEE, and it just freezes. Next, I'm going to remove the reset so that we've got 8 steps, and we'll dial in a square wave. One of the things you'll notice with 8 steps is that it's easy to dial in an octave higher, and 2 octaves higher. It's also easy to dial in a combination of those 3 octaves. And that's the KLEE Sequencer. It can be clocked well into the audio range. It's not as wide a range as the Q960, but it's still very usable as a Waveshaper. This is the Behringer 960 sequential controller, modeled after the MOOG 960. And we're going to use it as a Waveshaper. The first thing we're going to do is turn it so that we've only got 2 steps. We're using the output from row A. Let's turn on the internal clock. And we can see the lights flashing, and we can hear the tick, tick, tick. And that's the top of the range, unless we add an external CV. And now I'm going to start a sequence from this other sequencer. And the reason it's dropping out is that it's hitting the top of the range for this internal oscillator. So let's go to a 921 oscillator and plug it into the shift. And we hear that it can go quite high. I can't hear it at that 1 foot stop. So let's take it down a bit and take that same CV and drive the 921 oscillator with it. And we start the sequencer. Now let's go to 4 steps. And of course it went down an octave. And we can make variations in the wave shape. There are all 8 steps. And that's the demo of the 960 sequential controller as a Waveshaper. It's got quite a wide range when driven from the 921 external oscillator. And given the price tag, I think they make a great combination for oscillator and Waveshaper. So that's the video on using a sequencer as a Waveshaper. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you come up with some variations on this idea, please let me know in the comments. If you're still watching, thank you for that. Please like the video and consider subscribing if you enjoyed it. So let's close out with a little jam using some of the techniques that we've developed here.